Alright, today we're going to discuss intensity. This is a continuation of the last talk where we defined intensity, what it was and the different ways of which you can use to measure it. If you want to find that one, go back to 107 in the series. Today we're going to talk about manipulating intensity and ways in which you can produce overload or progress utilizing this variable. So the first thing to discuss is intensity itself, the skill of lifting heavier weights. There has been at least one study, although there's probably been a number of studies that have denoted or showed that if you want to lift 90% or heavier loads or improve in that zone, you need the specificity of lifting at that intensity. Lifting at 70 to 85% accruing volume at that's going to increase your potential. You're going to increase your hypertrophy, you have a bigger cross-sectional area, you're going to have a better potential to produce more force to lift more in that plane of motion, but you're not going to have the skill, or you're not going to be able to optimally put that into practice without accruing practice at 90% and above weights. So that's why programs like RPE or systems like RPE or programs that allow you to lift over 90% on a regular basis are pretty good for the sport of powerlifting, and what could be more specific for powerlifting than lifting singles at 90% and above, because ultimately that's what we do in the sport. So that's the first kind of classification, is the skill of lifting heavy. If you want to get better at singles, you need to do doubles, triples, singles, all at above 90%. Obviously there's a small window for which you can do that. There's only so much volume in a week, so much volume in a month, you can use that practice. But if you want to ultimately maximize your potential or to maximize what you got to do it. You got to lift above 90% so that you can become better at 90 to 100% lifts. So intensity on its own is not really sufficient to produce an overload. Simply lifting to a max once a week, it's not really going to produce any benefit for you unless you're on steroids or you're a newbie. Because if you're on gear or you're a newbie, you're going to have the mechanical factors taken care of, either by being completely new to the stimulus or having supernatural high levels of testosterone taking care of the mechanical factors, producing the muscle size and everything that needs to happen in the background for you to be able to increase your capacity, or for you to be able to lift more than you can, for you to progress ultimately. So what I'm saying in a roundabout way is we need volume and we need intensity together. And those two are the two main variables that we can utilize and we can manipulate to produce overload and to produce progress in the long run. So intensity on its own is not really something you can manipulate to produce overload or to produce progress. What intensity is a very good variable of, it's a good skill-based variable you can manipulate to make yourself better with what you got, so you can optimize the muscle mass you can have, you can optimize the strength you have, you can get better lifting singles as you are, or it's something that you can utilize to produce a peak performance. And peaking is something we'll cover later down the line in this series. There are some gimmicks we can use to increase the intensity of the lift. We can utilize chains, bands, partials, weight releasers, eccentrics, tempo lifts. We can utilize all of these different variables to produce what is a supra maximal effort, where once we get past the sticking point is the ultimate breaking point in any movement. When we break down, we're going to break down in the sticking point. We'll probably go over that in a later talk, but the sticking point is basically the point in the movement where you're biomechanically the weakest. This doesn't change. You can't train that out of who you are. You can maybe change it by changing your stance, changing your technique, but all you're going to do is you're going to put the sticking point in a different place. Ultimately, the sticking point's there for anatomical and physiological reasons. You ain't changing that. No training. So there are gimmicks we can utilize within our training program to increase the intensity of these lifts, or to overload the strength curve with something like accommodating resistance, like chains or bands. But that's just adding to what we're doing. This may be something that might add a novelty, might change something, it might be a good skill learning tool. They're good tools you might want to utilize, but they're not going to produce overload themselves. If you look at a very popular template such as the Westside template, where there's an ME or a max effort day, you'll see they also have RE and DE, so they have repetition effort, and they have volume, and they have dynamic effort, which is ultimately more volume. So you're going to program for powerlifting like Westside, which uses a hell of a lot of intensity, or exposes the lifter to a lot of intensity, max effort of some kind every week. It still has volume, it still has dynamic effort in there to produce overload. So to produce overload or to produce progress, we need volume. We can't have it with just intensity. So what happens if we just use intensity? What happens if we just say we sack off the volume work and we just do singles maybe once or twice a week to try and get stronger? Well, basically what you're going to do is you're going to optimize what you got. You're going to become good, you're going to become better at singles, your technique will improve, your rate of force production will improve, your intramuscular coordination will improve. You'll basically become better, more optimized to lift heavier barbells to produce force, which will be a good thing, but what will happen is you'll just peak what you got. So let's say you have the potential for a 300 kilo squat, but you're only squatting 260 kilos because of technique. Or there's a few things getting in the way, maybe you don't do any heavy work, you don't do any single work, so you go, fuck it, right, I'm just going to do singles. You might realize that 300 kilos after 4 or 5 weeks, but once you hit your your potential, or once you hit your capacity, the only way is down. Eventually you'll start stagnating, and then eventually you start going backwards. So that's why we need volume in the program, we need frequency in the program, we need the other variables in the program. Intensity is one of the most powerful tools we have to produce overload, to produce progress, to produce a peak, to produce optimization, but on its own it's not going to produce overload, it's not going to produce progress on a sustained timeline. It just can't, it hasn't got the tools for it. So what's a way of thinking about intensity as opposed to as an overloading the intensity? Because it's not really something that works. Overloading volume, overloading frequency, maybe even overloading something like variation has a bit of logic to it, has something we can play with. Overloading intensity outside of like very short kind of shock mesocycles is not something that we can utilize on a regular basis to produce overload. So what's a way of thinking about it? Well, I like to think of it as a timing zone. So if you come from a conditioning background, or you come from a sporting background where you've utilized a heart rate monitor, you might be familiar with things like timing zones. So you've got 90% plus of maximum heart rate, which is high intensity training. You've got like recovery training. So there's different zones. So there's a way of thinking about this with intensity that we'll cover in the next lecture, and hopefully that will give you a better understanding of how intensity sits within the program and how we can maybe bring in things like frequency and volume to help along with that. So that'll be the topic of the next talk. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Marquise. You are watching Cast Iron Strength. If you like what you see, hit us with a like, hit me with a comment. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Catch you in the next one. Goodbye.